Hello and welcome to this video for COMP3218 Game Design and Development at the University of Southampton. We are going to be going through some of the students' first courseworks. So my name is Tom Blount, I am a lecturer on the course and I am joined here today by...
Josh Harris, who is one of the demonstrators for the course.
Excellent. So for this coursework we asked our students to make a small game prototype that had a clear core dynamic and demonstrated a way of tutorializing this to the player. So let's get started. Okay, and this game is Days Left. So this already looks quite interesting. We've got a nice little title screen here. We've got some sort of thematic audio in the background. I'm intrigued.
So is this on the menu screen a part of the tutorial?
I have no idea. Let's jump in and we'll find out. So, okay, so it's highlighting the mouse to show that we can move around. Good start. And then as we move around, it disappears. It's a bit sensitive, but you know, I can handle that. Then we get the next little pop-up telling us what the movement controls are, and they're staying there until I move. So that's a good start.
Nice.
Wow, this is very, very sensitive. I'm barely moving my mouse at all. Okay, so we've got something written on the wall. Hey stranger, you don't know me, but I was in a coma just like you, presumed dead by everyone else who left. I remember this game now. The food is beginning to run out, and I feel I have to leave as everyone else around here did. I'll leave you the best of my berries, and hopefully by the time you're awake, some of the bushes in the forest will have grown back. Yours, Alex. Okay. So eat berries. Slightly Alice in Wonderland vibes, but okay. So pick that up. Pick this up too. So now we have 2 berries, and I guess if I press F, we'll eat them. Okay.
Yeah, so the hunger bar on the top left, I guess, is what you've got to keep your eye on.
Yeah. Okay. So we're bumping into this thing, and again, it's not going to go away until we've shown that we can jump. And oh, it's crashed. Oh.
Was that you pressing the space bar that crashed it?
Seems to have been. Let's bring that back up and we'll quickly skip through the rest of it and we'll see whether that happens again. Okay, that seemed to work. So
It's a bit better.
yeah. So
Okay, so it looks like they've got some really nice sort of set dressing for their level. It's kind of conveying a very convincing kind of hospital theme.
yeah, we've got this. So shift to crouch as well. So interesting set of mechanics, and that slows us down as well, which is kind of nice. It'll be interesting to see whether they were just added for the sake of it, or whether they're things that we're going to have to use. Okay, so there's the outside. There's some more berries out there. Nothing really in this room. So it might have been nice to sort of continue that set dressing down here as well. But yeah, otherwise, like props, a little bit of environmental storytelling almost. And then here we are outside in, I guess, the middle of nowhere. There's some more berries.
Okay.
Now where do we go? There's a fence and then just infinite void.
Okay,
That's
is
a good-
there anything in the trees? Anything in the area?
Don't know. So there's some more berries up here. Perhaps we should go around and check the other side of the building. Okay, so my hunger is still lowering. It's a bit of a steep hill. So I've got some berries that I can eat. I wonder if I could... I'm going to do something possibly quite silly. Oop, nope, crashed again. It doesn't like me jumping.
Okay, so looking at their game notes, they said that they were considering having a combat system with zombies, and they were concerned that it would have taken away from their core dynamic. So it sounds like they've kind of trimmed back that and kind of focused on just the survival.
Okay. So what do we do now? Is it just a case of we sort of wander around this and pick berries and eat them?
I think so. I can't see any other mechanics apart from the...
That's interesting, because I can understand the logic behind we don't want to sort of enforce a destruction dynamic because you know, it might take away from the survival thing, but I think zombies can still make a very good survival game, and particularly add to sort of some of the notion of meaningful play and things like that. But we'll get onto that in a minute. I guess let's start looking at the mark scheme, and we'll start with the overall quality side of things. So there are a number of criteria that we asked each group of students to demonstrate as we went along, and the first ones were about the quality of the game. So the first one was
presentation.
There we go, presentation. Thank you. So Josh has got the mark scheme, and I've got the gameplay. So yeah, presentation. So things like the information design, the consistency of the graphics, use of audio, and things like that.
Yeah, so I think it's got some nice things going for it in the presentation. It's nice to see kind of the start of the set dressing and the sort of UI elements telling you how to sort of control the game and things. I think been done quite well.
Interesting. Yeah, so overall, I would say like the graphics in particular are, you know, very nicely sort of set out. They're consistent. I actually really like the way they've done the grass. So they've got the sort of, I guess, standard Unity sort of terrain and stuff like that, but they've covered it up with all of these grass textures, which is kind of nice. Well, not textures, but it's slightly let down by the fact that we're just in the default Unity skybox, and there's just the edge of the world over here, which is a bit of a shame. Like,
yeah,
maybe
it would be nice to see the terrain, even if you've got the fence blocking you off from going too far, having the terrain kind of carry on for a bit.
Exactly, even if it's just like a skybox image of a city in the distance or something like that.
Yeah.
But okay, so that's quite nice. There's a sort of background audio track as we're going along. I think there's a little sort of noise as we eat the berries and that kind of thing. So that's pretty good. Is it just me, or is the sun's moving as well? So that's kind of nice. We'll see if the lighting changes over time. Because
I did see in their game notes they have a reference to a day-night cycle they've used.
So that's kind of nice. So what would a good be under the? In fact, actually no. Like, what would an excellent be under the mark scheme that we've got?
So excellent is key information is shown clearly, consistent and appealing graphics, good use of audio.
And you know what? I don't think this is far off of that. I'm almost tempted to drop it down a little bit of a notch because of the just sort of like edge of the world kind of thing.
Yeah.
But overall, the actual game space is nicely put together. Like you say, there's like props and sort of set dressing to give you an idea that it's a hospital. It's clear which bushes have berries and that you can interact with. The rest of the information design is pretty good. In fact, I'm tempted to say actually leave it at excellent just because of all of those elements working together.
Yeah, I think so.
I think particularly like the changing light and stuff in the day-night cycle is good. I'm going to sort of question the reason for it because it doesn't seem to have done anything.
So that's the next part of the quality section. It's sort of like gameplay, mechanics and controls.
Yeah, and I think this is where it's going to maybe struggle a little bit. I'm just going to turn the music down slightly so it's not drowning you out. Is that there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of gameplay.
No, it seems almost like a very sparse version of Pac-Man, where
without the ghosts
you can go around and eat items you find, and obviously you have to because you've got that hunger bar constantly ticking down. But I feel like there isn't much more of a threat.
Actually, something that I'm going to say, I will drop the... Ooh. Should we drop the information design sort of aesthetics mark down? Because we've got this HP meter, but no indication of what's going to drop. I tell you what, I'm not going to eat any berries, I'm going to wait for my hunger to go down, and then I'm going to see how that affects the HP bar, and we'll see if there's any sort of extra indicators of that, and then we'll make a decision.
Yeah, so the other thing to note is it's very dark on the screen currently.
Yeah, I know I just praised them for having the sort of day-night cycle, but right now I'm hoping it gets light again, otherwise this is going to be a very boring YouTube video.
So it looks like you can sort of stay within the hospital to have some light.
Yeah. But yeah, onto the gameplay mark. So let's start off at the good level for this and just sort of say what would that require?
So the good level is a set of complementary mechanics and smooth, usable controls that leads to meaningful play.
Ooh.
So I think we've got smooth, usable controls.
Yeah.
You said about the mouse sensitivity being quite
It's a bit jittery, but
oversensitive.
it's absolutely usable. The question is, what set of mechanics have we got? So we've got... yeah, I think we are going to have to drop their information design markdown a little bit, because I've just noticed I'm starving to death.
Yes.
And there's no real indication of that other than that bar at the top ticking down.
So you're thinking an audio design or more of a visual design, sort of making it a bit more obvious that you're...
Yeah, exactly. Just like, the sort of like little pained grunts or something every time it ticks down, or the screen flashing a bit, or just something to indicate that there is an emergency, you are going to die. I'm not sure that I hit 0 health there either.
Okay. Oh, unless the aim was to survive a day and you just got to the morning?
Oh, maybe.
Possibly? I'm not
and
sure.
That just quits it immediately as well. Okay. Okay. So again, that's the other thing. Our ultimate goal isn't super clear. And again, the jumps. Okay, so yeah, back to what set of mechanics we've got. We've got picking up berries. We've got eating berries. We've got a hunger bar that ticks down that will damage your health if it gets to 0. We have jump and we have crouch. But outside of getting out of the tutorial, we never use those again.
Yeah, so it's hard to describe them as complementary if they're only used to leave the start, I think.
Yeah. So there's a number of different mechanics, but they don't necessarily work well together. Or, well, they don't work together in that we're never encouraged or forced even to use them.
Okay. So on the mark criteria, a pass would be few or inconsistent mechanics, challenging controls leading to limited meaningful play. Would that be fair, or is that a bit too harsh?
So this is the thing. I think the real problem with it is the lack of meaningful play. We're not working. Maybe it's the... Yeah, I'm trying to decide whether there's a total lack of meaningful play, because there's not. We have a goal.
You are surviving the element.
Yeah, the
it
goal
does
is
kind of fit the survival element.
That's the thing. The goal is to not starve to death, so we're encouraged to go and pick these things up and eat them, but it's very limited in terms of sort of challenge. And there's not a lot sort of to do once you've sort of like picked them up and eaten the berries. You just sort of stand around waiting and not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I think So what was a pass and what was a satisfactory, and we'll decide whether it goes between them or whether it lands on the pass side of things.
So the pass was few or inconsistent mechanics, challenging controls leading to limited meaningful play, and satisfactory is a set of mechanics and usable controls that leads to some meaningful play.
I say let's be somewhat generous and put it between the two, because the controls are fine, they're not particularly challenging, and there is at least the idea of meaningful play. Perhaps there's not necessarily enough challenge, like if the hunger bar ticked down faster, or we had a clearer idea that, maybe the berries respawn and we've got to constantly run between them before we properly starve or something, and I've just noticed our shadow looks slightly weird.
You're a walking cylinder.
But yeah, something like that. But I think we'll put it between the two, and then we'll move on to bugs.
Yes. So, the most obvious bug's probably been the crashing that you've had a few times.
Yeah, and I think also the game is, it's not overly complex. Like, it's a relatively simple game. We've got moving around, we've got picking up these things, and we've got eating them. They are managing the different status bars and things like that. But yes, we did have that sort of game crashing bug a couple of times. So, what would a satisfactory be for bugs?
Satisfactory is game is playable and reasonably complex, but there are infrequent serious bugs or frequent minor bugs.
And I would say that probably fits.
Yep.
So let's put that there, and then the next stage is the how well this game fulfills the brief.
Yes, so the level design is the first part.
So this is, I guess, another issue with it, in that it's not obvious that the level has been designed.
No, it does look...
The inside of the building shows a lot more thought and attention than seemingly the rest of the game, in that you start off like looking at this at that wall that has the sort of key information on it and things like that, and it's sort of put together quite nicely, and I just jumped over that thing and it crashed again. I might even drop... I don't know. We'll hang on to that for now. So yeah, this bit is like, you know, nicely designed. The fact they definitely had to put some effort into sort of setting that bit up as it is. And it crashed again. Actually, no, I'm gonna say
yes, so yeah, the level design, if it were to be good level design, it would be a sensible level design that demonstrates a number of mechanics with good pacing and some clear goals, risks, and rewards.
So they are... Yeah. Go ahead.
We've definitely got some clear sort of goals of eat the food, don't die. But I think there's not really enough mechanics here to really kind of sort of show off the level design.
So in a way it demonstrates two mechanics that, as we've already said, you never need to use, and also there is no real risk reward. And that sort of plays into the lack of challenge as well, in that like you just sort of wander around the level, and it's not like these things are hidden anywhere. There's no sort of necessary challenge in finding them. There's no...
It'd almost be interesting if you had to like crawl through dark spaces or something, you know, use the mechanics you were taught in the tutorial to find more berries. Okay, so a passable level design would be a level design that demonstrates some of the mechanics but poorly balanced or paced, and with lack of clarity over goals, risks, and rewards.
And I think that seems to be where we're sitting.
I think so.
So just for the sake of argument, what would the level below that be?
The level below that would be a poor level design that does not demonstrate the mechanics adequately, is poorly balanced and paced, with lack of clarity over goals, risks, and rewards.
So I do think they've achieved a pass on this, because it does have like their one main mechanic, which is eat berries, don't starve. It's a shame that they don't have additional mechanics to demonstrate, but the mechanic that it does have, their level adequately lets you explore, but it's the risk reward thing that sort of lets it down somewhat.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is the sort of tutorial aspect of it.
Yes.
So again, so they have a sort of contained area within the hospital. The actual controls of the tutorialization of the controls was pretty good. It sort of popped up on the screen, it stayed there until you demonstrated you could use it, and then it went away and it moved on to the next bit. That was pretty good.
Yeah, it was. And I think having the thing like the eat berries sort of like put on the wall feels a bit more natural than having kind of the objective being sort of like put as a big pop-up. It kind of embeds it into the game world, which was nice.
Yeah, and similarly the like the sort of flavor text or the story text, I guess, sort of being written on the wall of like somebody that's had to leave you behind or something, so they've left you like the initial sort of berries in a thing to say these are good. They are kind of hammering you over the head with it, like they painted a giant berry on the wall and said, here, eat this, but you know. And then that sort of sets you up to say, okay, these bushes that have berries on, let's go and find all of those.
Yeah. The shame is the sort of, as we've mentioned before, the elements that it teaches you that it never actually uses in the game.
Yeah.
I think that's almost a wasted opportunity.
And again, it's the sort of the lack of mechanics which it can tutorialize you. But yes, so what would a satisfactory for tutorial be?
Satisfactory would be a partly integrated tutorial that communicates some goals, risks, rewards through the level design and introduces most information and mechanics in a logical way.
And that's the other thing, right? The lack of goals, risks, and rewards kind of means that they can't be tutorialized. But I do think the other elements of the tutorial are done sufficiently to be a bit better than that. So what would a good be?
A good would be a mostly integrated tutorial that communicates most goals, risks, and rewards through level design, and that introduces information and mechanics in a logical way that fits what has gone before.
Yeah, so I think overall it does meet, like, the integrated part certainly meets that. We sort of, like, we do, we get shown the berries, we get shown to eat them, the controls and the sort of actually getting out of the hospital bit all works kind of well. Aha, so yeah, we did die the first night. So the goal is just to, I guess, survive the night.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult not to. Like, I had to try very hard to not eat anything there to die.
Okay.
So yeah, I think I would put this sort of maybe between satisfactory and, of course it's going to crash there again, between satisfactory and good, because the integrated parts are nice, the way they show the controls is good, but again, it's sort of, because there's a lack of mechanics and a lack of, it doesn't really signpost what the goal is, and the fact that there's no risks and reward to sort of teach you. And as we sort of talked about with the sort of level design elements, the level itself doesn't really do a lot to teach you what there is, because it doesn't look like the level has been sort of
fleshed out.
Yeah, thoroughly sort of thought out or fleshed out. Although, yeah. Having said that, the fact that as soon as you leave this thing, you can see a berry bush right in front of you, maybe it does. So yeah, I would put maybe between satisfactory and good there.
Yeah. Okay then. So the next section is talking about the core dynamic. So as we mentioned before, this is a survival core dynamic. And yeah, I think it fits the core dynamic quite well.
I mean, I could almost argue that it's a collection dynamic, because we're mostly
in the game notes they have mentioned sort of arguing against that, saying the reason our game is not collection, even though the player is collecting food, is because they are using those resources to maintain their health and hunger to ensure they stay alive, rather than using resources to expand or develop their current standings.
Now that is wonderful, because that is exactly the justification I was hoping to hear. So yeah, they've definitely thought that through.
So I think the other thing we need to question is, have they fleshed out that core? They've fleshed out their ideas to fit that core dynamic, because they kind of have the bare minimum survival.
Exactly, yeah. So the mechanic that they've got is unquestionably survival focused, but again it's that lack of complementary set of mechanics that support it. So there's...
Yeah.
So again, let's consult the marks criteria and let's say, what would a good be?
A good is a clear core dynamic that suits the theme of the game, and that it is well supported by the primary mechanics and mostly appropriate audiovisual choices.
And I'd almost be inclined to say it is that. So part of it is it feels sort of very artificial because the level space is so small.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're, lost in the wilderness and we're trying to survive out here for as long as possible.
It would almost feel better if it was on a desert island or something like that, because then you get the kind of more natural feeling, sort of being stuck in a bubble, rather than just the world ends.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing. It's like we're sort of lost and isolated and trying to survive, whereas, yeah, the fact that it is just sort of fenced off nothingness makes it a bit surreal. So yeah, I think as we already said, the mechanic that they've got, clearly survival, so they have, and their justification for it is very good, but it's that there isn't a set of mechanics that supports it, which is a bit of a shame. So what would... where was I going with this? What would a satisfactory be? So we'll see if it goes sort of maybe between the two.
A satisfactory one would be a core dynamic that is a poor match for the theme of the game, and or is supported by only some of the mechanics and audiovisual choices.
Do you know what? I think this might actually hit the good just barely.
Okay.
So for example, in terms of audiovisual choices, we've got the sort of the passing of time really sort of hits that dynamic as well. And again, the mechanics that we've already sort of hammered them for them not having a big set of mechanics, but the mechanics that they've got all lean towards that survival thing. So I think we could credibly say this is a good in terms of the dynamic. What do you think? Do you think that maybe that's a bit too generous, or?
I feel a bit apprehensive to give a good because it is the bare minimum of the mechanics to back up that core dynamic.
Yeah,
I think
you're probably right.
And I think it does almost get confused with the collection, but they have sort of justified why it isn't collection. But I would be hesitant to give it a good just because it's lacking those mechanics to make it feel survival based.
All right, let's go with that, and let's move on to the next one.
Yeah. So the last one is feedback, which is how they've implemented the feedback given to them in the sessions before this. So shall I read from their game notes?
Yeah, give us an example of the feedback they were given and how they've addressed it.
So the feedback they were given was to try to be careful about how to add the combat to make sure that it still feels like a survival game and not like a destruction game. And because of that feedback, they decided to remove the combat system of the zombies altogether. Which, I mean, it does follow the feedback, but I think that wasn't quite what the feedback was saying. I think the feedback...
Yeah, it's sort of all about making the...
trying to survive against them, not that you're playing a Doom clone and killing them all for fun.
Yeah, exactly. So the changes that they've made do meet the... they've acted on the feedback, but they've not necessarily interpreted it fully. So again, let's take a look at the mark scheme. What would a good be?
A good would be feedback was articulated and reasonable changes have been successfully made.
And a satisfactory would be...
So I am hesitant to say that the reasonable changes were made and were successful.
Yeah, so what would a satisfactory be in that case?
Satisfactory would be feedback was articulated and some changes have been made with partial success.
I think it solidly hits that. So they've made a change, and to be fair, sort of, you know, it does sort of play into the theme of we're alone and we're trying to survive. But I think it hinders their game in other ways because, as we've already said, there's not a lot else to do. And you can definitely incorporate those kinds of combat without it being a destruction game. You just have to lean the focus towards, as you rightly said, survival rather than destruction.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's just the lack of any kind of threat, lack of any risk reward, I think is really what's letting it down.
But yeah, overall, a good effort. Okay, so let's move on from that. Alright, and our next game is Space Jam. I love that film. Okay, so we've got tutorial, we've got easy, and we've got hard. I guess let's start with the tutorial. Use left and right arrows to move, space to jump, collect coins, avoid aliens, don't run out of oxygen. Okay, so we've got our coins counter, we've got a coin, and we do have oxygen up here which is ticking down. So I'm a little bit worried that, you know, if I was an exceptionally slow reader, we might have just died in the tutorial.
So would your suggestion have been to not have that tick down until they start moving? Or... Yeah,
maybe something like so. What was it, space jump? Okay, but they put like a little pickup here, I'm guessing, that bumps up our oxygen a bit. Okay, so they've made sure we know how to jump. They've shown us what these pickups are. Okay, we've got... In fact, let's just... Oh no, I fell down a hole. Okay, and it just puts us back to the beginning. So that's not too bad.
Okay. So it sends you right back to the start.
Can I could technically jump over that, but I'm more likely to pick it up. Okay. Avoid aliens. So this is one of those things, so those instructions they put at the top are sort of totally sufficient, but they could have done them one at a time. Sort of as we see each of those different things.
As well as hiding them sort of once you have kind of grasped that bit of information, just more as an aesthetic thing. It looks a bit prettier if there's no text on the screen. Yeah,
interestingly, I am stuck at the side now. There doesn't seem to be anywhere else to go.
So the game notes say this is a survival game. So does this mean you have to jump into the alien to finish the tutorial?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I guess maybe they're trying to teach us... Okay, so it definitely kills us. But then it just starts here again.
Okay. Is there no escape?
There's a back button.
Okay, so perhaps there's no actual finish state to the tutorial, and you just have to click.
Which would be very
back
odd.
once you're done.
Like I'd expect we just run off the side of the screen and we get a thing saying you have completed the tutorial. But okay, so let's go back and let's try the game itself, and we'll see what's different. So we've got a coin.
Looks very similar so far.
It does, except without the oxygen pickup. Yep, there's that jump. There's the alien. Aha! And then I guess here's the rest of the game. So the tutorial is just the first bit of this level, but with instructions over the top, and you can't finish it.
Yeah, I feel like that would have felt a lot smoother if it just went straight into the section you're now currently doing.
Yeah, definitely.
And taking away the instructions once you've reached that point.
Oh, these jumps are getting quite hard. There we go. Okay, so here we've got, I guess, a sort of risk-reward thing. We can, like, if we can prove our skill, we get that extra oxygen before we go on to the rest of the level.
Yeah, it's interesting that they've put the oxygen as the extra reward rather than a coin.
Well, I was gonna say actually, what's the point of the coins? Why are we collecting coins?
So from the looks of the game notes, by the end of the game, you'll be able to see how many coins you collected, coins that will help you build better spaceships in our future releases.
That's a slightly tricksy answer. Okay, so
yeah.
we've got to the finish, but it's also not progressed, and we're still losing oxygen. So we may have just won, but I think we're about to imminently lose. So I tell you what, I'll try this. I'll see what happens when we hit 0 oxygen. Then we'll try it again on hard. But while we're doing that, we can have a look at the mark scheme. And as always, we'll start off with the quality mark. Yep, there I go. And it just starts me. Okay, so it starts me right back at the beginning of the level, not at like any checkpoints or anything like that. Let's try it on hard and see how that's different. But yeah, so quality. So the overall presentation, information design, audio, things like that.
Yeah. So for the good section of that would be key information is shown clearly, graphics are consistent, appropriate use of audio, effects and/or music.
And I think it probably hits that. No bones about it. It definitely hits that. So we've got a lovely sort of consistent art style. We've got sort of these like fun pixely graphics. It's obvious what's a coin. It's obvious what's an alien. Like the audio's nice. We've got a cute little jumping noise. We've got cute little background music. The only thing that well, actually, I was going to say the only thing that could maybe be highlighted a bit more is the oxygen counter. So we've got, but it turns red when it's below. I don't know. It turns yellow when it's getting below something, and it turns red when it's getting sort of into the danger zone. So that's kind of highlighting it nicely. I mean, maybe if it like flashed or something, but even that might be a bit too, what's the word? Disruptive. But I think we're
I think
like...
it could.
Sorry, go ahead.
If you had it as sort of like a bar and had a similar graphic to the oxygen pickups you were finding, that might have been sort of a bit of a more polished look to it rather than just a text in the corner. But,
yeah. But I think presentation-wise, we're solidly past the goods, possibly even an excellent. Well, in fact, what would an excellent be?
Excellent would be key information is shown clearly, consistently, and appealing graphics, good use of audio, effects, and/or music. And
I think we're solidly there as well. So go on, let's just, for the sake of argument, what would a game need to be praiseworthy on our scale?
Novel yet clear ways of showing key information, consistent and thematically resonant graphics, excellent use of both audio effects and music.
And that's the thing, I don't think it quite reaches there because, sort of, for some of the reasons you outlined, like it'd be nice if the oxygen was done in a slightly more interesting way than just the percentage number. But it's certainly otherwise it's like very clean, consistent, like really nicely put together. So I think it solidly hits excellent.
Yeah, I think the only other thing that would make it look a lot more appealing would be having background parallax. So the background moves at the same rate as the foreground, which looks fine, but the polish you can sort of achieve very easily by just making the background move slower than the foreground.
So I think one of the things that is also preventing me from saying it's above the excellent is the thematic resonance idea, and I think we'll probably touch on this in a little bit, but right now it's not clear like what the theme is and what bits of it the sort of presentation should be trying to emphasize. So I think we say this is a solid excellent, and then we have a look at the overall, I guess, the overall quality.
Yeah, so the
overall gameplay, there we go.
Next bit of the quality, is the gameplay. For example, a good gameplay would be a set of complementary mechanics and smooth usable controls that leads to meaningful play.
And I think, again, we're definitely there. The controls feel like very nice. They feel sort of tightly put together. Like there's meaningful play in so much as I'm trying to get to the end of this level and I'm avoiding the aliens as I'm getting there. There are some, so there's the oxygen mechanic as well that's sort of tying into that, so that's constantly timing down but can be replaced with these power-ups. There's the coins, still not sort of sure how they tie into the rest of the mechanics. I like the idea that they were maybe planning to do something with them later and maybe didn't have time for that, but...
Yeah, it would be nice to see sort of like an upgrade system where you could maybe get a bigger oxygen tank or maybe like a double jump or something that you could spend those coins on. And they mentioned about a spaceship upgrade in future versions, but some kind of reason to collect them rather than just making a number go up in the top corner.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's entirely possible to have that as, like, you know, just the high score. So everyone's going to finish the level, but are you going to finish it with the most coins, say? But in which case you need to probably have more of them sprinkled throughout the level and probably have, you know, maybe some alternate routes. Like, kind of like the oxygen, like, there's a trickier spot to get to, and if you're really good and skillful, you can get those before your oxygen runs out, and then run back to pick up all of the others kind of thing, if that's the vibe they're going for. But okay, so that was the good. What was the excellent B?
Excellent is a wide set of complementary mechanics and intuitive and smooth usable controls that lead to enjoyable and meaningful play.
So I don't think it quite meets that because of what we were saying about the wide range of different mechanics.
It's
almost
kind of got the basics of a platformer, but sort of not much more on top of that.
I think that's the thing. In a way, no. I think they solidly meet the. I don't think they end up halfway between that even, just because there's like it's slightly limited on the set of mechanics and how they interact. So it's got movement, it's got jumping, it's got the oxygen pickup, and it's got aliens that kill you. So that's like a good set, but it could be sort of fleshed out a little bit more, like you say, with, you know, sort of double jumps or even sort of persistent
Different kinds of aliens.
Yeah, things like that.
I'm saying a solid good for that one.
I think so, yeah. And then I think this sort of ties into the next bit, which is bugs and sort of complexity. So I haven't noticed any bugs in the game other than, like, what I'm not sure if it's a design decision or not is that, you know, you sort of get stuck at the end of the level and the tutorial. So I'm not sure if that's a bug, but I think the main issue here is that it's not a hugely complex game.
No, it's got the basics there, but apart from, I mean, the menu screen's quite nice, having sort of the option of the different levels, but it'd be nice to kind of see that a bit more fleshed out, so when you finish a level, it actually takes you back there automatically, or sends you to the next level, rather than having to clunkily sort of click back and click forward again.
I'm also not sure what the difference between easy and hard is. Is it just that the oxygen's ticking down faster? Because the level's exactly the same, right? It's not like the jumps are harder or...
I imagine so. I can look at the game notes and see if they've
mention
described.
it, yeah. Otherwise I'll just... Otherwise, it doesn't even seem to tick down much more slowly. Perhaps the oxygen power-up you get refills more oxygen or something like that, but otherwise it's not hugely different. And the level itself, like, it's a very nicely put together sort of level. it could be a bit more complex, either through the use of sort of like some additional mechanics, like you said, like double jump, a slightly different kind of alien that has a slightly different kind of patrol, or just like a slightly longer level, maybe like an alternate route through it kind of thing.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see the hard level kind of putting in more complex jumps, maybe sort of like a bit of backtracking and sort of like jumping above. But it's nice to see kind of the slight ramp in difficulty. The first jump is very simple, and then you get into more complicated jumps. So you just sort of like lots of little short jumps.
That is true. There's definitely sort of a sense of pacing. But I guess we'll sort of come back to that. So bugs wise, there's the so what would a good be?
Good for bugs would be game is playable and reasonably complex. There are only minor bugs, and these are uncommon.
And a satisfactory would be...
game is playable and reasonably complex, but there are infrequent serious bugs and or frequent minor bugs. Which I think sounds fair.
Yeah, I think probably a satisfactory, just sort of in terms of like partly the sort of complexity. So we've got sort of moving through a level. You know, that's reasonably complex. We've got the oxygen ticking down. We've got the picking up the power-ups and stuff. It's got a reasonable complexity to it. And as I always try and emphasise during the course of these lectures, it is only meant to be sort of a game prototype. We're not looking for full AAA things like that. So for that, I'd say it's reasonably complex. There's a slight odd behaviour sort of at the end of the tutorial and at the end of the level, which I think I am going to probably file under a bug. Or
I think so.
Like bug or poor design choice, it's sort of difficult to separate.
I feel like your oxygen shouldn't carry on down once you've touched the big trophy at the end, which it kind of signifies the end of the level. It doesn't really feel like you finished the level, it just freezes everything there.
Well, that's the thing. If it just sort of freezed and said, you know, press space to continue, I'd be less inclined to think it's a bug, but the fact that you will eventually die. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked. So yeah, I think we chalk that up as a satisfactory, and then we move on to sort of the fulfilling the brief side of things, which was how well have they made a level, how well have they tutorialized it. So in terms of level design, we're looking for things like pacing, sort of the layout and things like that. So let's have a look at what we said let's again sort of middle of the road, what would a good be?
So a good for level design would be a sensible level design that demonstrates a number of mechanics with good pacing and some clear goals, risks and rewards. And
it's possible that I think we're probably there. So again, it's kind of tricky because they've got a set of mechanics. So like the coins, for example, it's nice that we can sort of collect them, it's nice that they put them over these gaps and things like that, but it's not really obvious what they're doing for us.
Yeah. And obviously you've got the enemies, which there's a very clear risk there that you have to jump over, and there's some timing involved in jumping over them without hitting them, as well as these sort of larger jumps as a increased challenge based on what you've learned from the easier jumps.
Yeah, that's it, but there's not this sort of necessarily risk-reward. So for example, like this spot, I've got to here, and I will be rewarded if I can demonstrate the skill, but I'm not necessarily risking anything to do it. I suppose... No, I'm not even risking sort of like the oxygen, because it would take me the same amount of time to do that as it would to just jump down and run this way.
Yeah, so if they had an alien on that platform with the oxygen, then you would kind of maybe have more of a risk-reward payoff there.
But I still think it's a good touch, and it's a good thing to introduce. Sort of like, you know, rewarding player skill is a big part of. I ran out of oxygen. It's a good use of pacing. Cool. So what would say an excellent be?
An excellent for level design would be a sophisticated level design that demonstrates a wide range of mechanics with good varied pacing and balanced goals, risks and rewards.
And that's the thing, I don't think it hits that, because again, there's not necessarily the wide use of mechanics being employed. So if there was a certain type of enemy that we had to sort of, I don't know, avoid in a particular way or some kind of thing. But otherwise, it's just moving right and jumping.
Yeah.
Like, which is, you know, reasonable. I guess just for the sake of balance, what would a satisfactory be?
A satisfactory would be a sensible level design that demonstrates some of the mechanics with an attempt at pacing and some goals, risks, rewards.
I think so where do you think it falls?
I think I would say it sits between satisfactory and good, maybe up to good.
Yeah, I was thinking that as well. I think it may be just below the good side of things, because like the level design is nice, but it's not hugely complex. I think is what we're aiming for.
Yeah, it lacks the sort of risks and rewards that it set out the potential for, but kind of not quite executed.
Okay, so the next step is the tutorial, correct?
Yes.
So I'll tell you what, So for this we were looking at sort of how well it's integrated with the game, sort of how well it teaches the player things in a sensible and logical way. And I think my big issue with the tutorial, at least, is that it's not hugely integrated with the game. So it just tells us the instructions, like it front loads all of that cognitive load on the player, and sort of before we've even seen an alien or a coin or anything, it says, here are all of the controls and all the instructions, and then just gives you the first chunk of the level to play.
Yeah, I think the level design in the tutorial, I think, is quite good, where you've got the jump with no setback, you've then got a jump with a gap in as the setback if you fail it, and then you've got the enemy. But I think the sort of presentation of kind of the bullet pointed lists of the instructions and everything in one go, it would even be nice to have the coin counter sort of not showing until you pick up a coin, just to let you get used to the idea of moving around the worlds before you sort of get faced with the collection parts.
Yeah, and I mean, they could, like, weirdly, if they'd not included this as a separate sort of section and they'd just incorporated it directly into the game, it would have sort of flowed really smoothly, because, like you say, they've actually done a lot of the tutorial through the level design rather than needing all of these instructions. So we've got this sort of, like, this bit of the level that forces us to show that we can jump before we're presented with the different resources and then the alien as well. Yeah. So not only do we prove that we can jump, we can prove that we can jump over a moving target, say. But the weird thing is that's kind of all undermined by the fact that once we complete this sort of bit of the tutorial section, if you like, we can't progress, we're stuck. So we just have to sit around and wait for the oxygen to time out, which is not a representation of the rest of the game. They could have, like, if they want just a small snippet to sort of help tutorialize the things, then they could have put the trophy here, so that, you know, we do the first bit, we get the trophy, and then that tells us what our goal in the game is, rather than just wandering around not doing anything and waiting for the oxygen to run out.
Yeah, but yeah, even if they just sort of dropped the whole tutorial level and just put you in the easy level with that text at the top, and once you got past the end of the tutorial section of that level, then took away the instructions and then let you carry on, that would have felt a lot more sort of integrated into the game.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
And that's not to say that you can't have, you know, a sort of, here's the tutorial and then here's the main gameplay, but the fact that the tutorial section is just the first chunk of the main gameplay makes that feel so sort of jarring and disjointed, I guess. And again, particularly because it doesn't have that ending that doesn't showcase the goal. So I think we're agreed that it's probably not going to hit the good criteria. So what's a satisfactory going to be?
So that is a partly integrated tutorial that communicates some goals, risks, rewards through level design and introduces most information and mechanics in a logical way.
I think it probably does hit that. Again, for the sake of argument, what would a pass be?
A pass would be a tutorial that communicates some goals, risks and rewards and that introduces some information and mechanics in a logical way.
So again, where do you feel?
I definitely think it sits in that satisfactory criteria, because it does integrate the tutorial into the level. It just then sort of makes some mistakes with the pacing following on from that.
Yeah.
It was a shame that it's given as a sort of bullet point list of instructions rather than kind of, you know, the obvious example is embedding in the worlds of arrow keys and sort of the spacebar as like signs sticking out of the planet. But yeah, having that sort of clunky bullet point list that comes up at the top of the screen isn't the sort of neatest way of doing it.
Well, it's not so much that it sort of appears like as a UI element than a signpost in the ground, but it's more it's not sort of tied to what the player is doing. So like you were saying before, if the bit that tells you here's an alien, avoid it, only appears when you've seen the alien, then it's sort of a lot more integrated and it makes more sense to the player. So okay, but yeah, let's go with satisfactory, and then I guess the important one is sort of the idea of the core dynamic. So during this course we looked at sort of a number of different core dynamics of sort of what is the fun bit of the gameplay, and we asked the students to sort of specify what they thought their core dynamic was and talk about how they've used the mechanics to really showcase that. So what did they say their core dynamic was?
So they said their core dynamic is survival.
Interesting. Would you agree with that?
I don't think that fits.
What would you say it was?
I would say it's spatial reasoning.
Interesting. So I would say it's race to the end. Because we've got a finite sort of amount of time to get to the end. We've got some power-ups that we can get along the way that give us a little bit more time to reach there.
Yeah, and obstacles to avoid on the way and optional objectives.
I can see why you'd say it's sort of spatial reasoning as well, though, because it's about sort of, you know, can I reason through this space to get to that location, and can I get all the power-ups and avoid them? So yeah, it's sort of...
I feel that the core gameplay loop is the sort of platforming side of things, which fits into spatial reasoning.
Yeah, and I know why they've said it's survival as well, and it's because they've got this oxygen meter that's sort of ticking down, and you're trying to prolong it. The problem, I guess, is that you can reach the end. You're not. Yeah. It's not about surviving. It's about getting to the end, because then you win.
Yes, I think the end goal doesn't fit survival whatsoever. I think the easiest way of changing this game into a survival game would be to have it as an endless runner style.
Yeah.
And then as you go along, you have to pick up the oxygen, otherwise you'll die. And having the end goal being how far can you run. So even having the coins as your high score, as your kind of objective is to maximise number of coins.
So
would convert this into a survival style game over a race to the end or spatial reasoning.
So that's the thing. That would absolutely solidly make it sort of survival. I will counterpoint that it's possible to have survival games that have an end state. So for example, Subnautica is all about surviving, but eventually the story ends because you've done a bunch of stuff, you've survived for a certain amount of time, and then effectively you win. But the goal in that is always to like keep doing tasks that keep you alive, and then like eventually you unlock a thing that saves you. Whereas in this, the goal is very clearly get to the end. If there was a case of, you know, you've got a fixed level and you have to constantly run backwards and forwards to pick up oxygen, say, and then eventually a spaceship comes and rescues you or something, then again that leads more into survival. So it's not just the fact that there's a clear end, it's that our goal while playing is to get to the end rather than to survive.
Yeah, that's true. And I think the other thing that doesn't fit with the survival is that the aliens seem to be a relatively easy challenge to overcome. It doesn't seem like there's too many risks to avoid.
Yeah, like maybe if they were guarding the sort of oxygen things or something like that. So I think part of it is there's a number of different mechanics sort of pulling in different directions. So I can absolutely see why they've said it's a survival game, because they've got this oxygen thing ticking down. But then we've also got the sort of the coins we're collecting. We've got this goal that we're racing towards, and like you say, we've got these sort of obstacles and aliens that we're spatially reasoning around. And I think that's the issue, that they've got a number of different directions they could have sort of pushed this game in, and none of them sort of push it quite hard enough in one direction.
Yeah, I just feel a bit confused.
Okay, so let's kick off by looking at the satisfactory mark for the...
So satisfactory for the core dynamic is a core dynamic that is a poor match for the theme of the game, and or is supported by only some of the mechanics and audio-visual choices.
So one of the things we try and do is sort of when there's been perhaps some confusion in sort of their interpretation of the core dynamic versus ours, we'll always try and mark it as, I guess, sort of our best understanding of what what the chord dynamic within the game actually is. But the problem is here, that's the thing, there are a number of different directions it could pull in, and none of them are really reinforced. So I think this might sort of qualify it for a satisfactory. What are your thoughts?
There is one thing, the visual style of the game does actually fit with the survival core dynamic quite well, being on a alien planet and requiring oxygen to survive.
Yeah, I mean that would sort of fall under some of the audio-visual choices, right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing, you're right, the sort of thematic setting of it, in that we're an astronaut, we're low on oxygen definitely fits that. Okay, so do you reckon it maybe deserves to be slightly higher than a satisfactory, or do you think around satisfactory?
I think satisfactory does fit, but it's worth noting that the audio-visual choices are quite fitting with the core dynamic.
Okay.
As I hope, yeah.
Alright, so the last one on our list is feedback, yes?
Yes.
Cool, so what was how did they articulate the feedback they were given, and how did they act on it?
So in their game notes, they've said that our initial idea had, in addition, the ability for our character to shoot the aliens, and each time you play, you would have been timed. We were told that in this way, we won't have a specific core dynamic, just a mix of multiple dynamics. For example, survival and race. After the feedback, we decided to focus on one dynamic, survival. Now when you play, your main focus is not to get eaten by the aliens, not to fall from the map, and to maintain your oxygen level in order to survive.
Okay, so from the sounds of it, they were given a set of feedback that sort of addressed some of our earlier concerns, in that maybe they have a number of different mechanics sort of pulling in different directions and things like that. If they've removed the sort of combat with the aliens, then that definitely removes another sort of, I guess, mechanic from that piece that's pulling in a different direction. We wouldn't want to be also confusing this with a destruction game, so I think removing that may have been a sensible choice. But from the sounds of it, they haven't necessarily gone far enough. So as we've sort of discussed at length now, there's a lot of there's a bit of confusion in what the actual core dynamic is. So I think not only should they have sort of removed one of those elements that didn't fit with it, they should have sort of maybe done something to sort of strengthen the other elements that did push it in the direction they wanted.
Yeah, I think so. Like we were talking about making the survival feel a bit stronger by having the oxygen being defended by the aliens. Something like that would kind of, you'd need that extra push to make it feel not confused. Okay,
well,
so
I think the main one is sort of like still with the goal at the end that you're racing towards.
Yeah.
But okay, yeah. So let's say what would a pass be, for example?
So a pass would be feedback was not well articulated, but some changes have been made with limited success.
So I think it's better than that. I think they've articulated their feedback fairly well, and they have had sort of partial success with the changes they've made. It just hasn't gone far enough. So what would a satisfactory be?
Satisfactory would be feedback was articulated and some changes have been made with partial success.
Ah, well, there we go. That's pretty much bang on what I was thinking. How about you? Do you think that seems to be a fair assessment?
I think that seems to fit very well.
Okay, so with that, let's move on to our next game. Okay, and our next game is Smash Roller. So, kind of nicely put together title screen. Slightly minimal, but like fairly consistent. Oh, this is nice. We've got a level screen as well. T1, which I'm guessing is tutorial. Yeah, tutorial 1. Got a lot of information about sort of the best times and things like that. I guess we'll start with T1. Oh heck. Okay, I feel under pressure already. Left, right.
Yeah.
Move left, right. Okay. Up arrow is jump. That's slightly off the screen. Okay.
Is that a resolution issue, or is that
unsure?
Scaling?
Ooh, this feels slightly odd to control. And
Oh, yeah, you've got a lot of acceleration on the...
Also, the camera's very... if I jump and then sort of move, the camera sort of centers the ball in a slightly different place. And it doesn't do it smoothly. It's a little bit odd. I'm struggling to do this first jump. But okay. Oh, no.
So one thing to note with the start of this tutorial, it kind of started with that timer ticking up right away, before you even have a chance to read the text. I think having that timer sort of say 00 until you press the button might have been a...
Yeah, or even like not having a timer until the second bit of the tutorial. So I do quite like this bit. I'm going to assume this is mud and not something else. But sort of when you like fall or roll into it, it makes a very loud squelch, and you stop very quickly. So it's very obvious what that does. And they've not sort of bothered putting up a thing saying this is mud, it slows you down. They just let you roll into it and see for yourself. So that's quite good. Okay, so
yeah, that's integrated quite nicely into the environment.
Okay, and similarly we've got this thing that very obviously just speeds us up. We've got a nice little sound effect to highlight that. And speaking of sound effects, let's just drop that volume down a little bit. There we go. Use bounce pads to gain height. So there, like this would be a perfect opportunity to again not have that text, because the only thing I can do is interact with that bounce pad.
Yeah,
but you know, better safe than sorry, I guess.
Maybe, I think I was speaking to this group when they were in development. I think I said to them about making their sort of icons for their objects in the world to be really clear what they were. I think maybe it was so obviously you've got those horizontal arrows for the speed boost, and the mud looks very much like mud. Maybe they were worried it didn't look enough like a trampoline or something to be obvious that you're bouncing around from it.
Yeah, fair enough. But I think, again, sort of just like the mud or whatever, it's obvious enough from the effect it has on you, what the effect it has on you is. Okay, spacebar in midair to smash. Okay, I can't get up there. Oh, so it's not sort of smash, it's sort of jump towards the ground? Which accelerates me and then bounces me up higher. Alright.
Okay.
Okay, so presumably I can use that to smash these bits of broken floor. There we go. Okay, so it's slightly odd that the texture of like these ramps is wood and everything else is stuff. I don't know if that's important. I was wondering, like, am I supposed to be smashing them, or are they just a ramp?
Yeah, it didn't seem to have any extra effect to having it like that.
Okay, so we've got that there. I'll try the smash again. There we go. And then what's this thing? Oh, is that just like a round bounce pad?
Okay.
So to me that looks very different from the other ones.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If it had the same texture as the bounce pad, if it was in a circular shape, you'd instantly think, you'd recall as you see it, like, oh, this is obviously just another one of those, but it's a different shape, so obviously sends me in the direction depending on which face you touch.
Not doing very well at stars.
Yeah. So I don't know whether these are sort of like optional objectives, if you're expected to get a bronze or a silver most of the time and then exit to get a gold, or whether it's sort of more of a challenge mode. Because obviously you can get to the end of like getting the stars and it doesn't like tell you to retry and do it quicker. It might be the case though, that they haven't sort of tested with a variety of new players to see how quickly they get to grips with the game.
I mean, it's fine. It's like my first run through. I'm not expecting to get super high scores and whatnot. That was quite satisfying, that bit. It's like, so it feels like a lot of the screen is empty space a lot of the time. So it's not like I can sort of see what's coming up and sort of planned for it.
So do you think having it more zoomed out would help?
Yeah, perhaps. I'm sort of slightly lost at where I'm supposed to be going, to be honest, but it feels like... I mean, which I guess is almost a point in the level design's favour, in that I'm not sort of like particularly aiming for a point, I'm just sort of following the course that seems to be the right one. And I don't think I'm going around in circles yet.
See you in a few minutes if you start recognising the level.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Okay, still no... almost a star that time.
Yeah. 6.59 seconds off.
It almost feels like it needs a restart button just here, so I can say, oh, well, you know, this time I'll get it. But alright, we'll next level, and then we'll see where we go. So yeah, let's start talking about the game in terms of the criteria. So here it's interesting, because there is definitely a set of different directions to go. So I will say there's probably... I'm getting ahead of myself slightly, but there's definitely sort of choices to be made.
Yeah, so that bit before you kind of smashed down through the 3 levels of the breakable wall, but it looked like you could have just zigzagged down.
Yeah.
So it's nice it gives you those options, and I'm guessing each option is kind of either more or less difficult than the others. So you kind of have... You can make meaningful choices if you want to go for the easy but slow route, or the quicker but harder route.
Yeah, which is good. There's a slight issue of sort of what I was getting at before, of because I can't see the difference between the routes, I have no idea what I'm choosing. So maybe that's the sort of thing that has to come from... Okay, so this is hilariously frustrating, but I actually do kind of like that as a design. It's very sort of... what's it? Like a pinball table. But yes. I've totally lost my train of thought now. So I was saying that... So I got ahead of myself, and I said, oh, I got a star, nice, I'm doing it again. I was getting ahead of myself and saying that it's nice that they've got these choices. Presumably that's some sort of risk-reward thing. It's a shame that we can't necessarily see the full sort of, or at least partial impact of, oh, if I go this way, I'll have to hit a lot of bounce pads, but if I go this way, I don't know, I've got to avoid a lot of mud kind of thing. So it's like, which route do I want to take? Which do I think I'd be better at? But perhaps that's something that would come from just learning the course.
Yeah, I think it seems like there's quite a lot of replayability of the level, where you keep on playing it again and again to try and get a higher and higher sort of classification.
Oh heck, I'm not going to get a star this time, am I? Okay, but yes, let's start at the beginning of the mark scheme and have a look at the overall quality, starting with the presentation, the information design, the cohesion, I guess, of the different assets.
Yes, so if this was a good for quality for the presentation, then it would be key information is shown clearly, graphics are consistent, appropriate use of audio, effects and or music.
I mean, there's certainly some nice music, there's certainly a lot of different sort of sound effects as I jump and bounce off things. Oh, I've got silver, brilliant. There's a nice
I think
countdown as well, sort of when you get the sort of, oh, what do you call it, like the sort of the starting buzzer. So yeah, I think I'm not hugely keen on the background. Like, it feels like it's a bit too low contrast compared to like the platforms and some of the instructions, but you know, that's, I guess, a slightly minor thing. Otherwise, the graphics are relatively consistent. They're these sort of nice flat colours. It's sort of obvious what, more or less obvious what each of the different bits are. So we sort of spoke about like this bounce thing. It's not hugely obvious that it's just a bounce thing, but round.
And those sloped brown platforms.
Yeah.
It's not obvious that that's any different to that is the same as the concrete, but there's no sort of reason for it to be brown.
So yeah, so perhaps like a few inconsistencies, but I think overall it's definitely good. I maybe a little higher than that. What do you think?
Okay, so if it was excellent instead of good, then key information is shown clearly, consistent and appealing graphics, good use of audio, effects and or music. So I think it does fit more into the good than the excellent. I think the graphics they're sort of nice and minimal. I think some of the effects look a little bit inconsistent with each other. So those that broken, the partially broken floor that you can slam down on, kind of looks like it doesn't really fit, and everything else is quite sort of clear lines, and then the mud is sort of like very sort of zigzaggy on top.
Yeah, like
I think it's not quite as consistent as it could be, but it's definitely like there's nothing that seems really out of place. So yeah, I think it definitely fits in that good section over the excellent. Do you think the same?
I probably think the same, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so that moves us on to gameplay.
Yep.
I...
Yes. So
Go ahead.
if it was good for the gameplay, then it would be a set of complementary mechanics, smooth and usable controls that leads to meaningful play. So do you think it's above that, below that?
So here's the thing. I'm struggling with the controls, but I think that may be fault of... No, not again. I think that may be fault of me rather than the controls. Like, they're a bit tricky to use, and I think like part of the way the camera moves might be part of that. But overall, like, they handle quite well. Like, it's difficult to say.
I'm wondering if that camera movement was trying to address the issue you were talking about of not being able to see what was coming up.
I think it probably is. And simply, like, the ball feels like quite heavy to move, like it's got a lot of momentum to get going. But I think that kind of fits the gameplay they're going for. Like, it's not supposed to be like a sort of, you know, a Mario thing where you're like able to turn on a dime. You are a ball rolling around, which is why you've got, I guess, weight and momentum and whatnot. Oh, I can just avoid those smash things and go this way. I wonder what happens.
Especially with those sections where you're smashing down into the like floor. I think if you felt really light and airy with that, it wouldn't really fit that mechanic.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, I'm definitely having fun playing because it's challenging, but sort of in a good way. So what else were we looking for in this section? No, it's totally...
So a set of complementary mechanics, smooth usable controls that lead to meaningful play.
And
I think I agree with that.
I think we're solidly there, because we've got like limited sort of mechanics that I can sort of do as the player, but even then we've got the sort of, you know, jump, smash, roll, that kind of thing, but most of the mechanics come from interactions with the terrain, right?
Yeah, and I think that's fine. They are the mechanics of the game. It's different obstacles that you sort of charge into and get affected in different ways.
So would you maybe even say that it's a bit higher than that? What would higher on our scale be for this?
So higher on the mark scheme is a wide set of complementary mechanics and intuitive and smooth usable controls that lead to enjoyable and meaningful play.
Again, difficult to say. I think it may be halfway there.
Yeah, so you think halfway between good and excellent?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, because also, yeah, I guess sort of a mechanic to consider is like the timer itself, and the fact that it awards us different things based on our performance.
Yeah, so it's worth noting that they have said this is a race to the end game, which we'll get into later about the core dynamic. But I think that time was a really nice way of not punishing new players, because you can finish in however much time that you need to get through the level, but you're very much rewarded for doing it as quickly as possible.
That's the thing, it's usually a better idea to reward the player than punish them. And sort of also going back to something that we mentioned earlier, the sort of like the choice you can make. Like, here's actually a really good example of sort of the player being able to see that. Like, I can just sort of try and trudge through this sludge, as it were, or I can sort of, you know, make the attempt to go this way.
Yeah, so it does give you a nice, meaningful option. And there's lots of other little cases where you've got those sort of branching paths. So here, I think you can either go left or right, or is that a left coming?
So that's the thing. That's the other thing I was going to say is it's not hugely obvious the route I should be taking. Like, I don't think I've gotten lost yet, but I don't know if that's luck or design. So yeah, here for example, there's definitely two routes.
Yeah, I think you can see the path once you've already made the decision. So there, you can't actually see it bouncing up there on that slant or going through the tunnel and bouncing up, which is a better option. But when you've got yourself into that pinball maze, you can see there's the bit that avoids the bouncing around endlessly.
Yeah.
But you've already sort of made that decision, so I think there's
a lot of
it works for the replayability. But in the moment on your first playthrough, you kind of lose the meaningful bit of the decision, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But again, we'll cover that in a minute. So, for pure gameplay, did we settle on what did we settle on for that?
For gameplay, I think we settled on between good and excellent.
Okay, in which case let's move on to the next bit, which is sort of bugs and complexity. So I don't think I've noticed any. Oh, I like this display as well. It shows your best score on each level. That's actually really nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, bugs and complexity. I've not really noticed any bugs. I thought I had, but it turned out to be just a mechanic that maybe wasn't super well tutorialized, which was the there are certain platforms that you can go up through but not down through. So those thin bits there. So I thought I'd sort of ended up stuck outside the level at this point. And then I realised, actually, no, I can... Ah!
Yeah, it's not obvious that that's
I found a bug.
to...
I can't jump.
Oh no, here was me just about to say, oh, I haven't... Yeah, there's no major bugs, maybe it should go down as in the excellent section, but...
Wow.
Okay, so good for bugs is game is playable and there is reasonably complex. There are only minor bugs and these are uncommon.
I think it's better than that, because this is what we would definitely call an infrequent bug. Because I don't know how I did that, and I haven't been able to reproduce it.
Okay, so excellent would be game is playable and reasonably complex. There are no obvious bugs.
I think we're mostly there. I mean, that's certainly not an obvious bug, particularly because I don't know how I did it. Maybe between good and excellent, but I think probably safe to say excellent there. What do you think?
I think I agree.
Okay, excellent.
Okay.
Next is the level design itself.
Yes. So it's talking about the level design and tutorial design in the next two sections. So if we look at what good level design would be, which is a sensible level design that demonstrates a number of mechanics with good pacing and some clear goals, risks and rewards.
So I think it's tricky. It's how clear are these goals, risks and rewards? Because otherwise I think it definitely meets all of that. Like, the pacing does jump up quite substantially from the tutorial to, I guess, the main game. But I mean, that's to be expected. But there is definitely pacing between it, and then that sort of expands into the second full level of the game. So yeah, and there are definitely instances of that sort of risk-reward that is not always totally clear and obvious. So I guess what would we say? What would it have to be for an excellent, and then we'll decide whether it. So
an excellent there is a sophisticated level design that demonstrates a wide range of mechanics with good varied pacing and balanced goals, risks and rewards.
I think that's the thing. I think that probably puts it in the good level.
Yeah, I think so.
Because
I think it's also not far off the sophisticated level design bit, but I think the kind of lack of meaningful choice, where you can look at a choice and think, actually, I have no idea here which is better than the other, and you have to pick at random,
so
kind of lets it down a little bit.
Without sort of having to remember it.
Yeah. So it works when you replay, but that's sort of just memorising the sort of shortcuts in the level, which is... Okay.
And that's it. That's why I would say that it's not clear, it's not necessarily sort of, I guess, clear, but it is present. So that's why I'm sort of comfortable putting it in the good bit.
Yeah. Okay. Next, looking at the tutorial design. Okay, so if it was a good tutorial design, then it would be a mostly integrated tutorial that communicates most goals, risks and rewards through level design, and that introduces information and mechanics in a logical way that fits with what has gone on before.
And again, yeah, I think that it fits that, right? So we've got the sort of different tutorial levels. They introduce the very basic mechanics sort of one at a time. They in fact leave the smash and the associated blocks there until like the second tutorial level, if you like.
Yeah, I
And
think it's
then-
got good pacing in the tutorial.
Yeah, and I would even say they actually communicate some of the goals, risks, and rewards. Again, maybe not as clearly as they could do, but within this level. In fact, I'm going to go back and demonstrate that, because in this bit they've got a bounce pad that goes into like 3 pools full of mud, right?
Yeah.
And it's like a case of, oh, okay, I can't just always land on these bounce things and just hope it takes me to the right place. I've got to be careful about where I'm landing as well.
Hmm.
So I think that's a good example of that. So this bit here.
Yeah.
Alright, so what would an excellent be?
An excellent there would be an integrated tutorial that communicates goals, risks, and rewards through level design, and that introduces information and mechanics in a logical way that builds on what has gone before.
And do you know what? I think I would say it actually meets that. So some of it's done through sort of like messages, and they're sort of like the sort of core concepts, but there are a number of bits in that that are done solely through the level design. So like I say, the mud right at the start, where it's just you roll through it and you slow down. And then they expand on that by having the bounce pad and then 3 of those muds, and they sort of build the complexity in that way. So I think, yeah, it probably meets the excellent.
Yeah, I think so as well.
Okie dokie.
Okay. So the next section is the core dynamic.
So yeah, you
So their game notes, they've mentioned that their core dynamic is race to the end. And they said this because during levels there is a timer at the top of the screen that counts up, encouraging the player to get to the end of the level as soon as possible. Depending on their time, the player gets rewarded with a maximum of 3 stars. The game has no fail state, and obstacles are focused around wasting time instead of forcing the player to restart. In the full levels, there are multiple paths a player can take, and each have their own difficulty and length, with difficult paths being shorter if traversed skillfully.
I mean, yeah, I can't really add a lot to that. That's basically all of the things that I was going to say about it as well. It really hits that core dynamic very well.
Okay, so if it was an excellent in our mark scheme, it would be a clear core dynamic that suits the theme of the game, and that is well supported by integrated set of mechanics and appropriate audio-visual choices.
And yeah, I mean,
Do you feel that's appropriate?
I would say so. I mean, so part of the reason I'm at a loss for words in this is because I'm trying so hard to get to the end and beat my previous score, so I mean it's definitely working. Yeah, so like even the sort of background music, it's got sort of like a relatively quick pace to it. It sort of keeps you moving. It's got this audio at the start that sort of really sets you off. It's kind of a yeah, yeah. Like
Yeah, I think there's even some cute little visual things. So when you hit a speed thing or you're falling into momentum, you get that little trail behind you, which really kind of backs up that race to the end. Because when you're going quickly, you can see that sort of speed trail to sort of reaffirm that you should be racing, I think.
And again, we've sort of said, like, obviously the core goal of the game is to get to the end and to do that as fast as possible. So yeah, so I mean, just for the sake of argument, what would a prizeworthy in this category be?
So prizeworthy would be a clear core dynamic that suits the theme of the game, and that is entirely supported by a well-integrated set of mechanics and resonant audio-visual choices.
So this now becomes, do we believe that these are sort of resonant? I think this might almost be between the two. But I think it's like, also from their game notes and their description, it's clear that they've thoroughly understood what this is, and they've tried to make sure all of the mechanics like hit it.
Yeah, I think it's been very sort of carefully planned, and they've kind of sort of thought about everything and put in lots of sort of little details that kind of really suit the race to the end.
I think sort of as before, where we were talking about sort of like the risk reward parts of it, and sort of as they sort of were talking about in their notes, like part of it is down to the different routes and things like that through it. the fact that it's not obvious until you've like played both routes and then you have to sort of go back and sort of compare, like there's no obvious way of sort of telling before you make the choice, is sort of the thing that stops it from being prize-worthy. But otherwise I think this is a very, very good example of a strong core dynamic.
So between excellent and prize-worthy.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. And then the final section is the feedback.
Okay, so what did they say?
So they said that one piece of feedback that they received was to make the graphics of the mud and the slope distinct, so that the player may not confuse the two. So they changed the shape of the mud to be different to the slope, so it was that sort of a zigzaggy texture, and increased the contrast in colour of the two in addition to applying different textures to each. Another bit of feedback they received was not to explain mechanics unless it was necessary to. So we removed the tutorial text for the mud and boost pads and let the player interact with the tutorial and experience it for themselves, since they would learn better that way. Yeah, so those first 2 points, so it is quite... Yeah. Right, so the next bit is they were also told not to introduce too many mechanics at once in their tutorial levels, so they spaced them out more to make the player experience more challenges in between the two. In between the new mechanics, which I think is fair. I think they've definitely done that.
Yeah, I think so.
So they give an example in the second tutorial. They introduced the round bouncer in a chain of difficult challenges, and it was tedious to restart the challenge since the player had to take a long path to get to the beginning of that challenge. And to resolve that, they modified the round bouncer to be in an isolated area, letting the player easily play around with it. And then they don't have to waste their own time. So that was that. The second tutorial, when they introduced that round bouncer for the first time, was just in that little room on its own.
Yeah.
I think that's me. So yeah, I think that definitely worked. And finally, they were told to add some audio to their project because it was sometimes hard to tell what the player was doing. So they added sound effects for jumping, bouncing off terrains, and the smash ability, as well as interactions with boost pads, bouncers, and mud. And they also added an upbeat song to get the players in the mood for going fast.
There we go, sort of also what we said about that core dynamic. So yeah, I think the audio sort of is kind of key to sort of not only the dynamic, but sort of making the information designs clear as well. Cool, yeah, again, I would say that was a well-articulated bit of feedback. Again, let's sort of see what the excellent would be.
Yeah, so excellent there would be feedback that was clearly articulated, interpreted, and reasonable changes have been successfully made.
And I think it sort of solidly hits that. So they've done basically exactly what they were told to do with the with the changes they've made. They haven't necessarily sort of put a new spin on any of them. They've sort of interpreted it. They've made some changes, and I think that's had an overall positive impact on their game.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so fantastic.
Yeah.
Was it any closing points you had?
No, I think it looks like a pretty fun game. Obviously, I've not been playing it; it's just been Tom playing it. But it looks like it's got quite a lot of replayability, given he's been playing it for nearly half an hour and is still trying to beat his time.
Yeah, and on that note, we should probably stop. So this is our last game for this batch, but we will see you shortly for another video. See you then.